So we're in here in the trunk, and one of the things that I had noticed was that there was this massive pigtail of wires. Had no idea, you know, why it was like that. And then my son is here, and we were crawling, looking around, looking up there, and we're trying to find if we can see a wire to pull to check for power at the fuel pump. And then he goes, "Hey Dad, I think I found the other half of those wires." That's a Jaguar for you, right? Wiring for that trunk, I actually use a real deal fabric tape to wrap my wires when I'm done. And that little bulge right there, that's obviously each individual wire has been soldered and individually heat shrunk. And then I wrapped the wire loom completely all the way down to the joint that is right there, and that looks a lot better now. Now obviously I'll probably tuck this away some way. I'm not exactly sure how that's supposed to be, but we'll figure it out. So anyways, that's at least the update for that. I can actually give you a crank sound, so you can actually hear that it does turn over. Still nothing on the fuel system. The car's been sitting long enough to where the fuel smells like lacquer. So all that fuel's got to get out of there. I assume that it should fire even on lacquer thinner or lacquer fuel. So we're getting nothing right now, but at least it does crank over, and the cranking sounds very, very consistent. So, see what I mean? Yeah. This is actually what I call I had to get my crazy cooter hat on. So, this is the actual bottom. This is the bottom of the main fuse panel. And I was just checking it out to see if I could see any green corrosion. And I saw a faint little hint of something right there, which you can see the green right in there. Okay, that's corrosion. Okay, so then I decided to go ahead and pull all the fuses. So I pulled all the fuses out of their location so I could gain access to this panel. When I pop the panel off, what do my eyes see right here? A whole ton of corrosion that's on this panel that shouldn't be there. Now I actually have to check the back side of the panel as well, because if there's corrosion on this side, most likely there's corrosion on that side. So we possibly just found out why we've got so many crazy signals happening, because there was so much corrosion all over this panel. So we're going to pop that out and see what happens. All right. So here we go. So here's obviously the fuel and relay panel pulled out of the fuse box. Underneath, a ton of just new pathways that this thing was creating. And then flip it over to the back side. And those right there are signal pathways. So we've got a little bit of a corrosion issue here. That is a flexible, I believe, like hinge type of deal. So I am going to have to unsolder all of those connections right there in order to unhinge this and hopefully see what's going on the back side of the circuit board. I'm not thinking anything should be happening there, but you never know. So sometimes corrosion likes to make its own pathways. So there you go, proof. Check it out. Signal pathways. The whole process of what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to desolder that whole section right there. So pretty much those pins, that double pins right there, all the way down, separating the two panels from each other. I will actually desolder from this side, not the other side. But I'll desolder from this side, I think. Yeah, I think this side. Well, one of these sides I'm going to desolder and see if we can open this thing up like a piano hinge and see what kind of corrosion is actually sandwiched in between here. Alright, so not the best job disconnecting that. Just cut them all. Just going to solder them back together. Got the board cleaned. There was, obviously you saw the corrosion in there. Got this all cleaned up. And hopefully now we're good. Now I'm just going to... I cleaned up this piece here. I'm just going to sandwich that back in place, make sure this is all dry, fold it back up, and then just throw some solder on those terminals, and we'll just see what happens. It's all sandwiched back, pretty much into place, and now we cleaned up the inside of that box. I gotta go ahead and place that cover back on, throw all the fuses back in, throw all the terminals, or throw all the relays back on, plug it in, and we'll see what happens. All right, fuses are all back in, and just because of my obsessiveness, I had to make sure that all the fuses were placed in the right position. The number 25 that I think is right there, I believe it's either that one or that one. I think that 25 is supposed to be a 20, but it's going to stay at 25 until I can find another 20. And we're going to just throw the relays in. So now we're just going to toss the relays in, toss in, see what happens. Back into the trunk. Now we've got all the relays in, and we're going to hook it up, apply some power, and yeah, like I said, wish me luck. So we used a wiring schematic and basically traced back our wires, found which connector was there. The first thing that we checked is we used a Noid light, plugged in a Noid light into, we went both on the first bank and second bank injectors, which is obviously the first left and right on the sides of this engine. And we actually did get a very faint pulse, and then it just disappeared. So that kind of confused us. So then what we did is we checked for ground. Ground was actually perfect, meaning ground to that injector signal wire. And then obviously we checked the actual signal wire itself through the connector over here, and everything checked out. I mean, we were right within that 0.2, 0.3 ohms. And I think even one wire we checked was like less than that. So then after that, then we decided to go ahead and check the crank sensor, because that would be that next thing, because the signal completely dropped off on the Noid light just out of nowhere. So, and that would be from the engine actually getting a little bit of movement. All right, so my son's got his technical know-how going on here. He's got these little pin connector things that he stole from other wiring harnesses and bad plugs and stuff or whatever. And we pinned out on the ECM for the crank signal. And then we were under here, and he was like, I'm gonna just, for giggles, check that crank sensor because it's not making any sense. So there's the crank sensor. Now right now I've got the rack unbolted because in order to gain better access to the wiring, which that bolt right there is what is pinching. See that right there? That's a bolt right in the center, and that is where we're getting our fluctuation on our signal for the crank sensor. So hopefully we found it. Okay, so here's the update. We pulled the shielding back. It's copper wound shielding, and this is the actual crank sensor wire, and that section that is right here is where we are getting our intermittent signal. See how those wires are crimped? Both wires I'm going to snip right in half and then resolder the connectors and then overlay it with heat shrink and then double heat shrink it and then pull that stuff back into position, and yeah, good times. So yeah, that's it. It does. It sometimes just takes a little bit of diagnosing. Now it shouldn't start up right away, seeing the system is probably dry. Give it a rip. Oh, that is nuts. All right. Definitely comes alive, and the gyro, you saw it, it's definitely with the speed of the vehicle.